Is here at 11. She's coming from the airport, so whoever she was first, so you might need to reorganise. And I'll be back after.
So, Paul, would you like to come and join us? Paul McNoe from Rebus.
Thanks for the opportunity to present. Where Rebus is in support of the proposal for Lincoln Lounge, and a number of issues really. One is that Riccarton's a very high volume area. It's an arterial service, so it's upwards of 3,000 passengers a day, 400 bus movements, so pretty significant for the city. Second largest operation in the city. It's a critical transport link between the west and the east and the central city, and we think it deserves good facilities. If you look at it by any standard, it doesn't really meet modern standards for an arterial public transport service in our view. And there are a number of issues with respect to pedestrian access, safety for passengers, and just accessibility for buses and capacity for parking. I guess it's also it'll be a stark contrast when the central city's new bus interchange is built, and then you see the level of sophistication around that, and you then go to Riccarton where you'd find very low level of service. So I think the city needs to take a generic view across its network and really put in place strong facilities there. The other issue I think that's really critical to note is that public transport actually enables growth and development across the city. And lowers long-term roading demands, which I think is something which is the council needs to take account of. I want to cover off sort of three myths around public transport. Now, some of you have heard this story before, so I'll be quick. The first one's all about kind of people being, basically PT travellers are poor sods with no money. The second myth is about only older people and children travel, and finally that bus passengers are a retail nuisance rather than any benefit. This is a survey from a pre-earthquake survey of Christchurch in 2007, and you can see across there that on the far right-hand side you've got the percentage of people who earn less than $10,000 a year, and on the far left and on the far right-hand side you've got those who earn 50 plus. So you can see that in fact there's quite a strong usage of public transport of people who have choices, and public transport works well for them. So I think it needs council support in terms of facilities around that matter. From an age perspective, if you look at that graph, the youngest from 15 to 17 through to 16 on the right, 60 plus on the right, clearly there's a reasonably even balance there. There's a bit of a lump around the younger people because that tends to be school children, who don't have other options in terms of transport. So again, it's a very broad demographic being supported by public transport. And 60% of the travellers are female, by the way, so it's actually very strongly supported by the female gender. In terms of retail, there was some work done prior to the earthquake in Christchurch, Wellington and Auckland by New Zealand Transport Agency, and looking at the broader rural picture as well. They did some analysis and they looked at what they call sustainable travellers, and those are cyclists, walkers or public transport users. And they determined in Christchurch they're basically spending $35 per trip on an arterial service. So, which is a significant sum of money, and what that accounts to, if you look at it from Riccarton perspective, it's $49,000 a day being spent by those travellers and $18 million a year. So, not insubstantial revenue that is coming from the travellers on public transport. So, just want to cover off those kind of myths really. If I look at Riccarton Lounge proposal, the picture you have in front of you really indicates a similar sized city in Helsinki, which is about 500,000 people, where you've got a direct linkage between the infrastructure for public transport and the local mall. Now, I know what's being proposed here doesn't quite go that far, but we really want to encourage council to think about how to engage those so it's a broad community, it's a normalised activity, that is comfortable for both retail and public transport passengers. a second photograph here just showing the sort of waiting area. So again, you've got airport-style lounge area with great signage. So just in terms of summarising, you know, passenger comfort's important to encourage people to use public transport. It's all about safer and improved pedestrian access, supports the bus interchange development and the wider city recovery, I believe. You know, normalises public transport and, you know, just makes it part of the normal community. So that's kind of about the lounge. The only other comment I make is with respect to accessible city and the position of the cycleway on the northern side of Chewham Street. I really want to make it very clear that from Rebus perspective, and I believe from GoBus's perspective, we understand the rationale for putting the cycle lane beside the interchange, but we think there's too much risk involved there. At some stage, there'll be a cyclist who does something wrong and the driver will not see them and there'll be a serious injury accident there, if not a death. And I do not want air drivers to be exposed to that. So I'm asking council to find another place to put that cycle lane. It's just too risky. I describe it as an unexploded hand grenade.
Thanks,
it will
Paul.
go off at some stage.
I'm not wanting to cut you off, but your time's through, but I'm sure councillors may ask you some questions around that too.
Thank you for
that
your
issue.
time.
That's the second part, which is another part of the Transport Infrastructure Environment Committee report. So thank you. And first question is from Yanni.
I'm really glad you raised that because I've raised that concern as well. Have you looked at what happened in Wellington? Because it seemed to me that they used a lot of signalisation. They tried to mitigate pedestrians and buses, but it hasn't worked. And do you think we're doing the same sort of engineering here that would, I mean, you've said it's going to be, you know, a risk, but Wellington's probably the best example I can think of where there seems to be a lot of engineering to make things safe and yet we still have accidents. Is it comparable to Wellington?
I think it is. Despite what you do, there are a small percentage of cyclists, and there are a small percentage who basically, if they want to go somewhere, they'll go somewhere regardless of what's in front of them. If that happens alongside a bus trying to turn left into the interchange and the bus driver, for whatever reason, doesn't see them, there'll be a serious collision. And that's, look, I'm not a betting person, but I put money on that occurring, and I really don't want our driver to be in a position where they've either seriously injured or killed someone as a result of an oversight or something that someone else has done. You know, and with the best intentions in the world and with the best engineering, there'll be those who circumvent it. You know, we see that every day. We see cyclists who go through red lights, who drive down pedestrian pavements on the wrong side and kind of expect to be seen. So those things happen, but they're a very, very small percentage of the cycle population. I just
Thanks,
want to
Paul.
make that clear.
So if we're to look at Chewham Street, would you prefer the north side of Chewham Street as an option?
Well, it's on the north side of Chewham Street now.
Hang on.
That's what's being proposed. So it's right alongside the interchange. I mean, it would be better on the south side from the point of view that you don't have that clash position. It's really that clash where the bus is coming up Chewham Street and turning left
side
into
of the street.
That's the clash that we'd like to avoid at all costs because of the risk at some stage.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, Paul, thank you very much for
Appreciate
your
your time.
submission
Thank
around both those parts of our agenda. Thank you. Is Dame Margaret here? I don't think she is she?
No.
Yeah. So.